Following Colin's accident with the flatbeds, the FAT director started paying more mind to the state of his rolling stock, and found that a lot of it was in a sorry state. So, he had got new coaches and trucks for the main line, and boy oh boy did they prove to be a hit. And Thomas and Henry were home. Thomas finally coming back from the works, and Henry being let out of the tunnel after Gordon had failed. Henry was very happy to be home, but his steaming issues caused him trouble, and he was not happy one bit. One morning, Henry was in the yards. His driver and fireman were trying to steam him up, but to no avail, when Nicholas came. Smile, Henry, it's a sunny day. Well, my boiler doesn't feel sunny, let me tell you that, Nicholas. Aw, come on, Henry, cheer up. You're sounding like old Ruth over there. And who is old Ruth? What a stupid name, too, if you ask me. Nicholas glanced over to the water tower where one of the new coaches was standing. And that's old Ruth? What an unfitting name, I say. Those are one of the new coaches. Well, I know that, Henry. It's just I nicknamed her that because she's very hard to the engines who pull her, so beware. Henry didn't know what Nicholas meant, and before he could ask, Nicholas puffed away to do some more shunting. And finally, Henry's crew managed to steam him up, and he puffed away. Later that night, Henry puffed back into the sheds to find a group of very unhappy engines. Henry whispered to Thomas and Edward. He liked Thomas and Edward, and worked on the railway with them for a very long time. "What's going on here?" asked Henry. "Pay no mind to them, Henry," said Thomas. "They're just bellyaching over some coach." Gordon had heard what Thomas said. "One could argue, little Thomas, that this is a matter of most importance. That rotten thing on wheels isn't here to carry passengers, little Thomas. It's here to annoy the bollocks out of us. I hate to say this, but I agree with Gordon. I take that coach out once, and I already never want to pull her again." "Ooh, you young engines are so sensitive. I don't boast, but back on the LBSC, whenever we had a misbehaving coach or truck, we'd teach it a jolly good lesson and it would never misbehave again. Just ask Thomas." "Well, Timothy, if you're so smart, teach it a jolly good lesson, as you say." "Trust me, I'll teach that fangled nonsense on wheels a lesson or two." "Be quiet, you two. If a big, strong, and grand engine such as me can't handle a coach, then nobody can." Henry thought about what Nicholas said to him, and what the engines just said now, and he had a lot to think about. The next day, Henry had an idea, and went to Nicholas in the yards. "Ah, Nicholas, just the engine I was looking for. Sorry I was so rude yesterday, but could you do me a favor? Could you put old Ruth on my train today?" Sure, why not? I don't know why you would want her on your train, but that's beside me. And it's not like anyone's taking her out anyway, so yeah, she's available." "Perfect. Thank you, Nicholas. And make sure to put her on the front of my train. The front." And sure enough, Nicholas put old Ruth at the front of Henry's train. Good morning," said Henry to the old coach. "Bleh! Who's this rotten engine?" "Excuse me? All I said was good morning."
Good morning to you too, I guess. Oh, I don't suppose you're gonna be the engine pulling me today.
Yes, I am. I'm the engine pulling you today. I don't suppose you have an issue with that.
Oh, it's nothing personal, darling. It's just a coach of my standards to be pulled by such a lowlife like you is absolutely disgraceful.
Henry indignantly snarled at the rude coach and went to the front of the train. Once Henry was at the front of the train, he was coupled up to the rude coach, and once the guard blew his whistle, he set off on his journey. Henry's plan was to try and reason with the coach, to see why it was so rude and horrid towards the other engines. He tried talking kindly towards it. He tried bumping into it. He tried exploring emotions. He tried shouting at it, but to no avail. They soon arrived to the mainline tunnel, which famously was named Henry's Tunnel after Henry was shut up in it. Henry charged through the tunnel and soon peeked out of it as soon as he entered. Everything was going smoothly until the old coach spoke up again.
Oh, thank goodness Henry didn't stop in the tunnel this time. I guess he finally learned that tunnels are tunnels and not rabbit holes for him to hide in.
Henry was absolutely furious and gave the coach another great bump. By the time that Henry arrived to the next station, he had had enough. Henry got his driver and fireman to uncouple old Ruth from the train, and then he took her over to a siding, and that's where he left her. Finally, Henry found a new coach and coupled it up to the train. Soon, it was time to leave, and Henry left the station feeling very angry. Later that night, Henry popped back into Tidmouth Sheds. He felt exhausted. Everyone had fallen asleep, and Henry was about to do the same when he heard a voice.
Henry, why are you up so late? Let an engine sleep.
I didn't even make a sound, and I was about to go to sleep myself.
You haven't answered my question. Why are you coming back so late?
Oh, nothing much, said Henry, and explained everything that happened with Ruth. Oh well, yawned Gordon. I guess there's no fixing that coach. But we'll talk more about the matter tomorrow. Now I need some sleep. The mainline viaduct that is just before Wellsworth goes over a pool of water, which over time weakened the ground beneath it. Of course, the viaduct was at no risk of collapsing, but whenever an engine would cross the viaduct, they would have to be very careful. But when old Ruth would cross the bridge, however, she would always yell for the engine pulling her to hurry up. They would always try to explain to her why they couldn't, but she would take no notice and would complain to no end. One afternoon, Henry was back at the yards again. He had just come back after pulling a very heavy goods train to Meron, and he felt exhausted. His driver and fireman were trying to make him better, but to no avail. While his driver and fireman were completing maintenance on him, he noticed Gordon filling up with water, and then he remembered the conversation they had the night before. Once Henry was feeling better, he asked his driver and fireman to put him next to Gordon. Good afternoon, Gordon. So, about our conversation last night about old Ruth, what did you mean by "there's no changing that coach"? Asked Henry. Oh, Well, last night it didn't really mean anything, but this morning I had the misfortune of having her on my express train, and once I was nearing the viaduct, I started slowing down like we're supposed to, and then she just started banging on about how I'm going too slow and I need to go faster, blah, 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 all that nonsense. And I tried explaining why I slowed down, but she had none of it. She always complains I'm going too slow or too fast. Oh, well, I'm really sorry to hear that, Gordon. You know, someone really needs to do something about that rotten old coach. You're telling me? I really hope the fat director does something about this. Maybe turn her into a henhouse or something. Henry wasn't really sure if the fat director would do anything about her. Later that day, Henry was pulling a passenger train. It seemed that the maintenance that his driver and fireman did no good, and he was still feeling very under the weather. He was pushing through to try to make it to Crosby. When they got to the next station, his driver and fireman looked him all over. I'm sorry, old boy, but your tubes seem to be blocked, and we can't clear them out right now. We haven't got the time. Could you please hold out until we get back home? Henry didn't want to disappoint his passengers, so he pushed on. Just then, Henry was approaching the main line viaduct, and he remembered what Gordon told him about Old Ruth. I'm sorry to say that Old Ruth was in fact on Henry's train. She was placed at the front, but Henry had a mischievous idea. But one thing that Henry didn't account for in his plan was that one of Old Ruth's axles was starting to heat up and fast. Old Ruth noticed this and was trying to get Henry's attention, but Henry was having none of it. He thought that she was just being difficult again. Henry, slow down, No, I will not, and I've had enough of your tomfoolery. Henry had rushed over the viaduct without a second's thought, and he was just entering a field when he started to smell the fire. He immediately applied his brakes and stopped, but it was too late. Finally, the already very hot axle box caught fire, setting the whole coach on fire. Thankfully, Henry managed to act fast and save the lives of himself, his crew, and the passengers. Then he went over to a nearby signal box, which the signalman called the fire brigade to put out the fire. When Edward arrived to carry out the remains of the coach, there was barely anything. The coach was completely burnt to a crisp. Oh dear, all of this is my fault. Don't throw yourself under the bus, Henry. This wasn't your fault. You could have never known. Well, actually, Old Ruth did want me to slow down, but I thought she was just being difficult again, so I went faster and rushed over the unsafe bridge. I guess that just aggravated it more. Oh, I'm so sorry, Henry. This is gonna be a fun talk with the fat director.